In this video, we will discuss some of the common methods of research in psychopathology. So, what is research in psychopathology? You can see here it says scientific research that fully tests a theory or technique on representative groups of individuals so clinicians can evaluate the accuracy, effectiveness, and safety of their ideas and techniques. So, inaccuracy in the field of research in psychopathology can cause great distress. So, in this screen part right here, we will discuss the different types of clinical researchers and what do they do. So they discover, broad laws of mental dysfunction. They search for nomothetic understanding. That just nomothetic means general. They don't typically assess or diagnose or treat individual clients, and they rely on the scientific method. So let me elaborate just a little bit on this. So clinical scientists, they try to discover broad laws or principles of mental dysfunction. And then they want to get a general understanding or nomothetic understanding of the nature, causes, and treatments of psychopathology across individuals. Except for research purposes, they don't assess, diagnose or treat individual clients. That is the job of the clinical practitioners. And then the scientific method, as you can see at the bottom of this slide here, scientific method, that is a 5 or 6 step process used to collect and evaluate information through careful observation. They use observational data to pinpoint and explain relationships between variables. They also try to determine whether 2 or more variables change together or whether change in one variable causes change in another. There are 3 types of research that are real common for clinical researchers to engage in. And these are, first, case studies. Case studies focus on one individual. We will elaborate a little more further as we proceed. The second type of research is what's called correlational method. And the third type is experimental method. So through the evolution of psychology and experimental research, there has been movement to discern that it is unethical to do certain types of methods on animals. So when animals are shocked, starved, separated from parents, or surgically altered, or even killed, that can cross ethical guidelines. Going forward, this is just a review here. The 3 types of studies that we are going to talk about. These are case studies, correlational method, and experimental method. A little bit of repetition here, but I'm doing this to help aid in mastery of this. So as you can see from this chart here, case studies, they provide individual information. They do not provide causal information, and it's not possible to apply statistical analysis to case studies. And on the far right-hand side, you'll see this term replicable. And that just means being able to, another person with another candidate for research would be able to engage in the exact same research method employed by the initial researcher. Okay, look at the second item here. It says correlational method. So that does not provide individual information, but it provides general information. So correlational just refers to there might be a relationship between two of the factors. It does not provide causal information, and statistical analysis is possible in correlational method, and it is replicable. Going further on this chart here, you see experimental method. It does not provide individual information because that requires, experimental method requires a group of subjects to be examined. And as a result, that does provide general information, provides causal information. Statistical analysis is possible, and it is replicable. So how are case studies helpful? Well, they provide detailed interpretive description of a person's life as well as their psychological problems. And it may also include speculation about why the problems developed. And it may also describe the person's treatment that they are receiving. Next, we will discuss the correlational method and the experimental method. So the correlational method, that just the general characteristics of correlational and experimental research methods. So that typically involves observing many different individuals. It doesn't offer, like a richness of detail-oriented information, but that does allow researchers to draw broad conclusions by working with a large group of individuals. And these methods are the preferred methods of clinical investigation. So correlation, let's describe and let's dig a little bit deeper into this. Correlation is the degree to which events or characteristics vary with each other. There might be a relationship. So correlational method is used to determine what we call co-relationship between variables. And at the bottom here, I use this term sample must be representative of the larger population. So a sample should be representative of the larger population that the researchers wish to understand, gather more insight and information. Okay, there are two types of correlation here that I'd like to acquaint you with. So on the left-hand side, you see this says positive correlation. That's the relationship between, in this example, the amount of recent stress and feelings of depression shown by this sample of 10 participants. So when one increases, the other increases. And then on the right-hand side, we see a negative correlation. That's the relationship between the number of activities and the feelings of depression shown by this hypothetical sample. So correlational data can be graphed, and what is called a line of best fit can be drawn. So a positive correlation, the slope is upward, as we saw on the slide right before this. So variables change in the same direction. A negative correlation, there might be a downward slope and variables change in the opposite direction. So one increases, the other decreases. Now on the graph, sometimes the different points that are shown on the graph, it might be inconsistent. And that shows that there is no correlation. It is unrelated. So when researchers describe a correlation, they talk about in which direction is the line progressing in the graph, and so as well as the magnitude of a correlation. And those are often calculated numerically. So there's something called the correlation coefficient we do talk about in this slide. It's usually symbolized in research by the letter R, but it can vary from +1, which is a perfect positive correlation, to -1, perfect negative correlation. So the sign, positive or negative, that indicates the direction. The number indicates the magnitude or the strength of the correlation. The number 0.00 indicates that there is no consistent relationship. So we need to keep in mind by, using this correlation coefficient, everyone's behavior is changeable. And many human responses can be measured only approximately. So most correlations found in psychological research, they fall short of perfect. So when can correlations be trusted based on a statistical analysis of probability? So statistical significance, that refers to the idea that the finding is unlikely to have occurred by chance. So less than 5% probability, that indicates that findings are due to chance. But findings that are more than 0.05, they are significant. So what are the merits of the correlational method? Well, it has high external validity, can generalize their findings, and they can be repeated or replicated. And some of the difficulties with correlational studies have been shown to lack internal validity, and they describe, but they don't really explain a relationship or causation. Next, we will talk about the experimental method. An experiment is a research procedure in which a variable is manipulated and the manipulation's effect on another variable is also observed. So the manipulated variable, that's known as the independent variable. And the dependent variable is the variable being observed. So just as kind of a little bit of digging a little bit deeper here. So the independent variable, it's manipulated to determine whether it has an effect on another variable. And the dependent variable refers to the variable in an experiment that is expected to change as the independent variable is manipulated. Now, sometimes there's what might occur is what researchers call a confound. A confound in an experiment is a variable other than the independent variable that is also acting on the dependent variable. On this graph, there's just some examples of some of the most common correlational questions. Please feel free to pause the slide and peruse these on your own pace. Additionally, on the right-hand side, the most common causal questions. So that way you can, by looking at this graph, you can sort of compare them to each other. So as I mentioned earlier, a confound is variables other than the independent variable that may also be affecting the dependent variable. So there are three features to guard against confounds. There is what's called the control group. So in an experiment, a group of participants who are not exposed to the independent variable. Random assignment refers to a selection procedure in which an experiment that ensures that participants are randomly placed either in the control group or in the experimental group. The final feature on this slide is masked design. And that's the feature of an experiment in which participants do not know whether they're in the experimental or the control condition. So the control group are the research participants who are not exposed to the independent variable, but whose experience is similar to that of the experimental group. And as you can see, the rules of the statistical significance are applied. So by comparing the two groups, researchers can better determine the effect of the independent variable. And, I listed clinical significance, and that indicates whether the amount of improvement is meaningful in the individual's life, even if the moods of participants who are depressed improve because of the treatment. The individuals may still be too unhappy to enjoy their lives. So we discussed random assignment ensures that every participant in the experiment is as likely to be placed in one group as another. Mass design experiment in which the participants do not know which group they are assigned to. And some will achieve things like experiment bias, or they may receive placebo therapy. And then the double mass design, though, that's the experiment in which both the participants and the experimenters are unaware of the groups to which the participants are assigned. So the mass design, going a little bit further, used to keep individuals unaware of their assigned groups. And I gave these examples: placebo or placebo therapy. There's a double mass design. That's when neither the participants nor the experimenter are aware of which group they are in, what's going on in their experiment. So here's some alternative research designs. And I'm not going to dig too much deeper into these. But feel free to pause this slide and look at all these and maybe research on your own. They may be helpful in your assignment. So we talked about matched designs. That's design matches the experimental participants with the control participants who are similar on key characteristics. So experimental participants with control participants who are similar in age, gender, cultural backgrounds, family size, socioeconomic status, the type of neighborhood in which they live, or other characteristics, as some examples. Another alternative research design is what's called natural experience. Natural experiments, nature manipulates the independent variable and the experimenter observes the effects. So those events cannot be replicated at will. Because the participants in these studies are selected by an accident of fate rather than by the investigator's design, natural experiments are in fact called quasi-experiments. Quasi-experiments. Another alternative design is what's called analog experiments. So the independent variables are freely manipulated while ethical and practical limitations are avoided. There's what's known as single case experiments. That's when a single participant is observed before and after manipulation of the independent variable. What's important to realize here is that this is a single participant. They are similar to individual case studies. At the same time, because only one person is investigated in a single case experiment, the researcher cannot be sure that the participant's reaction to the independent variable is typical of people in general. Longitudinal studies are when the same individuals are observed on many occasions over a long period of time. That's when researchers, they don't directly manipulate the independent variable or randomly assign participants to those conditions in a longitudinal study. So they cannot really pinpoint causes. However, because longitudinal studies tend to report on the order of events, they do provide compelling clues about which events are more likely to be the causes and which are more likely to be the consequences. In this slide, we talk about epidemiological studies. So in epidemiological studies, they reveal the incidence and the prevalence of a disorder in a particular population. So I gave some definitions of what incidence and prevalence mean. Incidence refers to the number of new cases of a disorder occurring in a population over a specific period of time. Now, prevalence refers to the total number of cases of a disorder occurring in a population over a specific period of time. So incidence, just kind of reviewing a little bit, the incidence refers to the number of new cases. Prevalence refers to the total number of cases of a disorder. Going forward here, another type of design is what's known as qualitative methods. Qualitative information is natural and unfiltered research methods. They intend to seek out each participant's direct perspective, gathering information that is offered in the participant's own words. It's hard to group together qualitative information that has been gathered across participants and to draw broad conclusions and predictions about wider populations, especially since qualitative methods typically rely on fewer participants than quantitative methods do. So thus, qualitative findings are not well suited for testing hypotheses or drawing conclusions beyond the sample under study. Another alternative research design is what's called mixed methods designs. And they provide a practical solution that combines or mixes both qualitative and quantitative approaches within the same research project. So that refers to findings from mixed methods. They often provide fuller and more revealing information than either just quantitative or qualitative studies alone. Another type of alternative research design is what's known as community-based participatory research. Community-based participatory research refers to working with members of an affected community. They work collaboratively with academically trained researchers at all stages of the research process. So as a result, partnerships are built on shared goals and trust, and often help produce immediate, meaningful, and lasting community change. So as we discuss all of these different types of research with human beings, we have to keep in mind, though, that all researchers have to abide by a code of ethics. So the researcher's primary obligation is to avoid physical or psychological harm for human participants. And they are commonly reviewed, their research is reviewed by what's called the Institutional Review Board. In general, they try to ensure that each study grants the following rights to its participants. The participants, they enlist voluntarily. Before the participants enlist, they are informed about what the study entails. The participants can end their participation in the study at any time. The benefits of the study outweigh its costs, risks to the participants, and the participants are protected from physical and psychological harm. Finally, the Institutional Review Board ensures that the participants have access to the information about the study, and the participants' privacy is protected by principles such as confidentiality or anonymity. So just going further here, some more information about the IRBs. Please feel free to pause the slide and look at your own pace here. Going just a little bit further, we have one more slide to go. So the IRBs, they try to ensure that each study grants the following rights to the participants. And I gave you all of these here a little bit earlier, but what is important to keep in mind, though, they are the group that ensures that participants' privacy is protected. This is the end of our discussion about research in psychopathology. Thank you very much.